And I think now Howard is going to fill in another important aspect of this addiction challenge, which has to do with pain, the nature of pain and its management.
That's my last slide. No? Okay. Well.
This is an opportunity for you to do a new talk as you go.
There we go. That looks like your name.
It does have my name on it. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to forget something. Okay, it's a slide. Well, we could start with this then. Over in the lower left-hand corner, you'll find Pittsburgh, which is... Microphone is where... Hang on.
Yes,
How's that?
perfect.
All right. Thank you. So, in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, you'll find Pittsburgh, which is pretty much ground zero for the opioid epidemic. It's obviously one of the biggest public health problems facing society today. It's complicated, as you know, and a lot of it is our fault. Okay? Why is it our fault? Well, inappropriate prescribing. I think this is the earlier version of my slides. Oh well, but anyway. What causes the problem with people overdosing and people getting addicted? And we asked this question in our lab, and very early on, what we found is that it was due to tolerance, that people developed tolerance to the reinforcing or the rush effects of opioids, but did not develop tolerance to the respiratory depression effects. So we'd be treating them for chronic pain or for the rush, and they would take more and more and more, get their rush and forget to breathe, and end up like the gentleman on the lower right. So the question is, what could we do about this problem? In our lab, we actually developed a way to completely reverse and eliminate tolerance. And we found that tolerance was mediated by a selective signaling system, and this was platelet-derived growth factor receptor beta signaling. And what we were able to show is that an inhibitor of the platelet-derived growth factor receptor beta, which is called Imatinib and is used clinically, was able to completely reverse profound tolerance and prevent it from happening. And here's a little experiment we did in rats that showed that. And what we do is we test pain in rats by looking at their tail flick latency, which is how long it takes them to remove their tail from a hot light. And we set it so the baseline is at about 3 to 4 seconds, and we start with low doses of morphine and keep doubling them till we hit the cutoff time of 10 seconds. And what you see in panel A is that we generate nice dose response curves that go up in a nice sigmoidal fashion, just like we learned in school. So I did with these animals is we gave them either as much morphine as I could give them without killing them, which is 150 milligrams of morphine, which one of my British friends told me was a sporting dose, or they got placebo pellets. And we put them in the animals and let them sit for 4 days. At the end of 4 days, we repeated the dose response experiment. However, in the morphine groups, what we did is split the groups. So one group of animals was pre-treated with Imatinib 30 minutes before starting the dose response. And what you can see from this graph is that the Imatinib pre-treatment almost completely reversed in panel B a 10-fold shift in the dose response curve. And if you go the next day and do it again, it does completely reverse this very profound, what I call industrial strength tolerance. So in summary, what I've shown here is that PDGFR signaling is actually necessary and sufficient for tolerance. We also showed that it's specific and selective, and it is a complete dissociation of tolerance from analgesia. And this is our proposed mechanism of how tolerance is inhibited. We have opioids that are binding to the mu-opioid receptor, leading to the release of PDGF, activation of the platelet-derived growth factor receptor, which leads specifically to tolerance. And Imatinib blocks the activation of this receptor. I'm not going to go on and talk about these, actually. What I wanted to talk about is actually some other older findings. I mean, these are new findings that actually lead to that could help us in the war against opioids. There's some older findings that relate to these findings on addiction. And what we found there is that very old studies done in the 60s, 70s by Mary Jean Creek showed that the addictive potential of opioids is related to the rate of increase in brain levels. And also, concurrently, the propensity or the rate of withdrawal development or craving is related to how quickly these levels go away. This is one of the reasons why heroin is a very highly addictive substance. So if you think about that, the very potent opioids that we use in the operating room, for instance, like fentanyl, sufentanil, this would predict that those really don't have a place in the treatment of chronic pain in the community. Also, we see that oxycodone, or the extended release of OxyContin, those drugs can be hacked and you can get immediately huge brain levels of the drug, which triggers a switch to addiction. So the good news there is in the next panel, the Surgeon General and the FDA have issued directives to regulate more tightly the use of these sorts of drugs in pain treatment. One of the things I always tell patients is, when I'm giving them these drugs or giving them propofol for sedation, please don't try this at home. Maybe we need to restrict these sorts of drugs from the use in chronic pain situation. So as I said, we'll wrap up. We're really kind of at ground zero of the opioid epidemic. We're in a great position to make an impact right now. There's old information that we can use to make this impact, and there's also new recent findings that we can use to do the same thing. And these are things that we can go out and start doing today. But make no mistake about it, this war on opioids is going to be very brutal. But we really can't afford to lose this war. And we really do have a lot to gain. Not only do we have the potential to eliminate the opioid epidemic, but also we have a chance to achieve one of the prime goals of all of medicine, and that is to provide relief from pain and suffering for all of our patients without inducing the pain and suffering caused by addiction. Thank you. Those are